Is it your position, since you're asking taxpayers for another $500 billion for the war, that American families should be forced to give up child care and health coverage so that you can have $1.5 trillion for this budget?
Senator, that's not my department. I certainly support this, and I also support the president's efforts to find and remove fraud wherever possible in a general sense.
I'm not talking
and we do that
fraud.
in our department as well.
I'm not talking about fraud. I actually asked whether an American family should lose their health care or their child care to pay for this budget. That is literally what the president suggested.
That falls outside my purview. And just like that, the moment he is pressed on the diaper and daycare funds of everyday citizens, he executes a flawless bait-and-switch to combating fraud. Your ears aren't deceiving you. We just watched a top-tier U.S. cabinet official, a man demanding an extra $1.5 trillion in taxpayer funds, effortlessly brush off accountability when asked if the American public should forfeit their children's medical insurance to bankroll a war machine. Step into the harsh reality of a government that openly values munitions more than the well-being of American households. Today, we are breaking down this entire confrontation. This is a hearing that rips the lid off a government, concealing the destruction of hundreds of military bases and brazenly manipulating the data. Get comfortable, because this is going to be a rough ride. Enter Senator Patty Murray. She stepped into this chamber, meticulously prepared. Pay close attention to her opening remarks, because every single sentence is a calculated strike.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, the war in Iran has not only cost 13 American service member lives, it is also costing American taxpayers dearly. Tens of billions of dollars and counting, and that's money that could be helping people perhaps get health care. But instead, we're paying for bombs dropped in a war that American people overwhelmingly oppose. Now, earlier this morning, I know that your team testified Trump's war with Iran cost $29 billion so far. That is $29 billion blown on a war of choice, and that's what it would have cost, actually, to save the ACA tax credits. But as my colleagues have already stated, what is concerning as well is it seems quite clear that that cost estimate is suspiciously low.
$29 billion. Murray highlights a razor-sharp truth. That exact figure is what's required to rescue the Affordable Care Act, ACA, tax credits. For countless families, those funds represent the boundary between receiving medical care and falling into financial ruin. Rather than preserving lives, that capital was converted into explosives. But focus on her final point. That cost estimate appears suspiciously low. Why is it questionable? Because that figure is a heavily sanitized lie. Murray is well aware of the cover-up. Earlier, the administration's own acting comptroller accidentally admitted that damages to U.S. infrastructure were excluded from that $29 billion calculation. Watch how Murray corners the secretary regarding the true extent of the devastation, and observe how he dodges the constitutional duty of supplying data to Congress.
Now, your acting comptroller suggested that damage to U.S. facilities was not factored into that figure. It is clear that there has been extensive damage to American military assets. New reporting from the Washington Post and others indicates that Iran has hit at least 228 structures or pieces of equipment at U.S. military sites. Can you tell us what the cost of damage done to U.S. facilities is because of this war?
Well, I think Jay covered pretty clearly what we can or cannot share, but I would simply respond that and I think it's an important point, considering what the president is undertaking, is what is the cost of Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon? And the fact that this president's been willing to make a historic and courageous choice to confront that, it comes with cost, and we recognize that.
I understand what your judgment is. We have a judgment as well, and I'm asking if you can tell us, and at what point you can tell us what the cost of damage done to U.S. facilities is because of this war.
Yeah, ma'am, thanks for the question. So for future posture, at least, we don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know how we're going to design these bases.
The damage to date, you do not have any cost estimate on it at all?
For the military construction, I don't have a cost estimate to provide you at this time.
Well, when will we get that?
Again, it depends on what the future posture is, how we decide to construct those bases.
To date, you know what has happened to date. We can't get that number, and that is a real concern to us. Our job is to appropriate dollars, and we're just told it's coming, and we don't get it, so it's very hard to do our budgets.
228 structures. Think about that. 2.28 buildings, radar arrays, and hangars reduced to rubble. We are looking at logistics hubs and aviation centers, assets that likely represent tens, if not hundreds, of billions of dollars vanishing into thin air, yet the Pentagon flat out refuses to put them on the public ledger. When an elected senator asks a straightforward question, what is the true financial damage, the Secretary's defense is articulated quite clearly what information we are permitted to disclose. Wait a minute. Who is Jay? Since when does an unelected, anonymous bureaucrat named Jay dictate what the United States Congress, the body that controls the nation's purse strings, is permitted to review? That is a staggering overreach of executive authority. The entire framework of checks and balances has been neutralized. And the moment the secrecy is challenged, Hegseth immediately plays the nuclear threat card. That is not an accounting answer. It is pure psychological warfare. He is essentially warning Congress. If you demand financial transparency, you are paving the way for nuclear Armageddon. They leverage apocalyptic fear to bypass fiscal accountability. They refuse to release the historical receipts, but they have no problem extending their hands for a new, mind-boggling sum.
And right now, Mr. Secretary, people are paying $4, $5, even $6, $7 for gas, and American taxpayers are now on the hook as well for paying for this disastrous war. You're spending families' hard-earned tax dollars on a war that many strongly oppose, and you're forcing people to pay more at the pump, and yet you're not even providing a real breakdown for the cost of this war so far. We have no real details, you have indicated that, and yet now you want Congress to send you $1.5 trillion more. To me, that is unacceptable, and I hope our Republican colleagues will join us in not only rejecting that absurd request, but in insisting that the American people get the actual answers on how much money, their money, we are spending on this.
$1.5 trillion, $1.5 trillion. To put that in perspective, if you counted $1 per second without ever taking a break, it would take you 47,500 years to reach the amount of money he is demanding. While your daily expenses are being suffocated by inflation, here is their reality. They lose 228 military installations, dodge all accountability, refuse to show the public receipts, and then nonchalantly request an extra $1.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion is a figure almost too vast for the human mind to process, but you must realize this, that money doesn't magically appear. It is a massive wealth transfer. It is siphoning the lifeblood out of the middle class from the citizens agonizing at the gas pump and funneling it directly into an unchecked, sprawling military-industrial complex. We've reached the boiling point. This is the exact moment the elite's mask slips completely. Watch this entire sequence as Hegseth attempts to deflect blame onto past administrations, and witness how Murray drops the hammer.
Now, let me turn and say, Secretary Hegseth, the president has called Medicaid, Medicare, and childcare little scams and said, quote, we're fighting wars, we cannot take care of daycare. I'm just trying to understand that. Is it your position, since you're asking taxpayers for another $500 billion for the war, that American families should be forced to give up childcare and health coverage so that you can have $1.5 trillion for this budget?
Senator, that's not my department. I certainly support this, and I also support the president's efforts to find and remove fraud wherever possible in a general sense.
I'm not talking
and we do that
fraud.
in our department as well.
I'm not talking about fraud. I actually asked whether an American family should lose their health care or their child care to pay for this budget. That is literally what the president suggested.
The president has proposed a historic $1.5 trillion budget that will defend the nation and confront threats like Iran, which previous presidents allowed to happen, as Senator Graham pointed out. Previous administrations said they wanted to take care of this problem, and they did not, and he's doing it.
The question in front of the American people is, what are they being asked to give up for this $1.5 trillion? That's where I was talking about. And lastly, Mr. Secretary, your budget request cuts through Trump's ramblings and really, to me, makes the truth clear that you and the president don't value families as much as you value defense contracts.
You do not value families as much as you value the defense sector. That is the absolute perfect distillation of this current government. The commander-in-chief dismisses senior health care, low-income medical assistance, and daycare support as little scams. Their level of empathy isn't just non-existent. It is actively hostile. Hegseth tries to spin the narrative by pointing fingers at the perceived weaknesses of previous leaders, but Murray yanks him right back to the undeniable truth. The real question facing the American public is this: what are they being forced to sacrifice for this $1.5 trillion? What we witnessed isn't a systemic error, it is the system working exactly as intended. They rely on the assumption that you'll find these budgetary debates too abstract and tedious to care about. They want you so drained from stressing over utility bills and $7 gasoline that you have zero fight left to question where that $1.5 trillion is vanishing to. Senator Murray, however, ripped away that facade to deliver a devastating fact. In their eyes, your livelihood and health are merely bargaining chips to secure more funding for weaponry. All right, if you've made it to the 20-minute mark of a deep dive into a Senate Appropriations hearing and you still plan on returning to this channel tomorrow, you are exactly the caliber of viewer I make these videos for. Do me a massive favor and hit the like button. It genuinely forces the algorithm to push this reality through the mainstream media filters. If you have thoughts you want to share, whether it's your frustration over inflation at the pump, or if you just want to type Orwellian 40 times in a row, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. Share this breakdown with anyone who is trying to figure out why they are working harder than ever but getting poorer, all while the defense budget balloons out of control. Ring the bell icon so you don't miss an upload. And please subscribe if you haven't already, because the most earth-shattering truths are almost always buried inside the most mundane political peerings, and my job is to dig them up for you. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.